Ladies and gentlemen, students, may I have your attention, please? Our session is about to begin, so please have a seat. Please fill the front seat first. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, distinguished guests, lecturers, students, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the guest lecture SAPPD 2025 with the title Landscape-Based Green Infrastructure. I'm Iza Firdausi, your host for today. I also would like to greet the speakers of today's session, Professor Dr. Steffen Nijhuis. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. Nijhuis, okay. The representatives of INUCoST, distinguished guests, Professor Dr. Sri Mariati, lecturers, and Ibu I Gusti Ayu Andani as our moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, this event is held in collaboration with Leiden-Delft-Erasmus or LDE universities and Indonesia-Netherlands Universities Consortium on Sustainable Futures or INUCoST. Today's event is the first guest lecture of this month to welcome the new semester, so make sure to keep updated for the upcoming series. For the next 40 minutes until 1 hour, together we will hear from Professor Steffen lecture about the landscape-based green infrastructure. So please pay attention and prepare your best question. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to first read the agenda for today. The first agenda is the opening session, and the second is guest lecture led by our moderator, Ibu Andani. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to invite for the guest lecture session. All presentation and discussion will be moderated by our moderator, I Gusti Ayu Andani. Allow me to read her short bio. Ibu Dr. I Gusti Ayu Andani is an assistant professor at the Urban and Regional Planning Department, Bandung Institute of Technology. She received a doctorate from the University of Twente in the Netherlands for her dissertation on the effects of toll road construction on the transport system, accessibility, spatial, and equity. Her research concentrates on travel and driving behaviors, land use transportation, interactions, and infrastructure planning, and also discrete choice modeling. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our moderator, Ibu I Gusti Ayu Andani. Please give us applause.
Thank you, Ibiza. So good morning, everyone. How are you? Good? Yeah. Good, right? Yeah. So happy to see you all here. So welcome to today's guest lecture organized by SAPP DITB in collaboration with Leiden-Delft-Erasmus or LDE University and INUCoST. My name is Andani and I am a lecturer in Department of Urban and Regional Planning at SAPP DITB. I am honored to be your moderator for today's session. So today's guest lecture is very special as it marks the beginning of the new semester. We are starting this academic term with an aspiring session featuring an esteemed expert in urbanism and landscape-based green infrastructure, Professor Steffen Nijhuis from Delft University of Technology or TU Delft. So before we begin, I would like to say a few housekeeping notes. So this session will last for around an hour. And for those who joining via Zoom, I think a lot of people already joined the Zoom as well. Please keep your microphones muted during the lecture. And there will be a Q&A session at the end of this lecture. You can submit your questions via the Zoom chat or raise your hand if attending in person. And an e-certificate will be provided to participants as well. So now let's begin our session. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Steffen Nijhuis, an expert in landscape-based urbanism, environmental design, and geodesign. He is a research leader in the Department of Urbanism at Delft University of Technology and the head of the Landscape Architecture Research Group. His work focuses on sustainable urban and landscape development, green infrastructure, climate adaptation, and digital methods for urban and landscape analysis. And beyond academia, he also actively contributes to research-based design and interdisciplinary collaboration to address global challenges in urbanization, ecology, and climate resilience. He has also led multiple international projects and has been widely published in scientific journals and books. And today, he will share insight into how landscape-based green infrastructure can be a key strategy for sustainable and resilient urban development. So without further ado, let us welcome Professor Steffen Nijhuis. Professor, the floor is yours.
Oh, welcome. Oh, welcome. Yeah. I'm very happy to be a part of this wonderful event and kind words. And indeed, like you said, so it's from from Delft University, but also part of the LDE consortium. And also recently we started a collaboration with 5 Indonesian universities. ITB is one of the good ones, I would say. Very famous, I know. Therefore, I'm also very grateful to be. And as I understand, there are also some very famous alumni coming from here. As I understand, also the Minister of, I have to look it up, precise, of Higher Education, Science and Technology. Very happy. And also, I would like to thank especially Professor Aswan Indraprastra and Professor Sri Mariati for their invitation and giving me the opportunity. And of course, also Andani for your one. Get rid of my phone now. It's easier. So, well, yeah, today's lecture is on landscape-based green urban space design. And yeah, actually, in this lecture, I would like to elaborate how landscape can become the basis for green infrastructure design. So you wonder, where's the word green infrastructure? But actually, green spaces are to me a kind of infrastructure. So a kind of functional, facilitating structure which help us to get a more lively environment, a more sustainable environment. And of course, it connects the more soft sides of society and ecology to hard infrastructures. So when I refer to urban green spaces, I refer to green infrastructure. So remember, when you are an engineer or an architect or whatever working on green infrastructures, remember to take into account biodiversity and ecology and social aspects as formative elements. Today, I would like to show a couple of backgrounds into this line of thinking, but I would also like to show you 2 examples from Europe at different scale levels. At the scale level of the public space design, where you see a nice picture in the background, but also on the regional scale. So actually, this approach is a multi-scale approach. So it's not only on the building level or on the public space level, it's also on the regional scale level. It's about the relationships. So, but because actually when we talk about green spaces, yeah, people like to live in fantastic green environment. As you can see here from an example from Guangzhou in the 18th century, where garden kingdoms were part of the city. So water, nature, and a fantastic living environment were combined. Also, a little bit later in time, here you see a regional plan, which was really constructed to create a nice environment in the northern parts of Germany. So this was like a regional design, solely focused on making a lively, green environment where also ecology, but also aesthetics were part of the plan. So green infrastructure design is not only about creating a kind of functional environment which solves certain problems, but can also increase the living quality. And that green is an important aspect to increase the living environment. It's very well explained by this. Because already in the 17th century, John Evelyn came to the conclusion that environments in London We should build orchard yards and trees in order to make a nice air quality, make the city more livable. So that's also the whole point of green infrastructures, that it is not only for the sake of biodiversity, or climate adaptation, stress mitigation, but it is also to create a healthy environment. And also a little bit later in the 19th century, park funded by authorities was established in order to create a better environment for workers. So this example, and yeah, it's not a history lesson, but very important to look, because there you also find the mechanisms why green infrastructures environments. And as mentioned, this was like the first park, Birkenhead, which was also financed by authorities. And of course, you also know Central Park in New York, also strongly based on the same idea. Olmsted went to Birkenhead and really started to understand that the green environment is, of course, a basic condition, livable and sustainable. And also on the regional scale, 19th century, Boston, they created this kind of park system of parks, connected green patches, which also integrated water structures, natural areas, recreational zones, and also routes by cars. So also here you will find the idea of parkways. And what's very interesting when you look in the upper right-hand image from your side, is that it was not only about a regional planning scheme, making eye-level design, making people aware of the landscape condition where they are in. Because people were completely disconnected from their environment. They did not understand at all how the water system functioned and what type of environment they were living in. Actually, in this case, the landscape architect, Elliot, came to the conclusion that we should also have like real interventions to make people aware of their landscape. So it's not only about making nice zoning plans or nice designs on the region, but also on the local scale. So the whole point of green infrastructure design is to work throughout the scales and to combine several. So it's not about water only or ecology only. It's also social infrastructure. It's also basic infrastructure. That's, I think, what you should. Nowadays, we are very used to put things in boxes. So you're from infrastructure design, you're from water management, you're from ecology. Actually, these environments integrate all of it. Therefore, it's very beautiful. Room full of future professionals have the ability to combine all of these things. That's the beautiful thing. Space integrates. Remember, in any assignment, you are how to incorporate these other elements. Water, ecology, social, cultural heritage. Because you have beautiful examples. But then the question is, yeah, what is urban green space actually? Yeah, so there are many definitions on it, and this is actually one of them. And actually, it states any space in an urban environment. Large spaces, it can be park structures, but it can also be abandoned. And then the question is, how to? Also a little bit more precise here, you see a kind of overview of all kinds of typologies. Green space is not like color on the map. We have many different shades of green. When people talk about green infrastructure, remember that this green can have many meanings. Then you say, yeah, is that important? Because what we see, for instance, in mangrove really that they only use one species, which grow really fast, but then monoculture. In the natural situation, you see many species together. So green is not green. So remember that when you are finding a public space. Type of green has its own qualities and logical and aspects as well, and function. Yeah, so you all know, yeah. So there are some ideas about what the functions really, let's say, from a perspective, the value. So green has supporting services, so structure, but also soil formation, but also it has provisioning, regulating services, green infrastructure purposes. So remember this when you start to design on these. How can we incorporate? Of course, when you connect these ideas, find very good reasons to create infrastructure. Of course, yeah, from a content point of view, it's the important thing to talk about. But in order to realize, important to have good basis in order to. Therefore, this kind of overview can. So, but when you summarize it, what is the purpose for green spaces? Now, well, we know from research that green spaces are crucial for physical and mental well-being of people. Files of proving that a green environment, quality of, and of course, there are some rules connected to it, so that there should be sufficient walking distance. Later, I'm going to show you some rules. Also, next to nature, or next to people, nature is a very important reason for biodiversity, but also soil vegetation. Western world, we are now also focusing very much on soil quality. Much of the soils are sealed. As you know, soil is the basis for any environment. Therefore, also very important. Because as you can see, when you have more than references help. Green infrastructures are also very important for climate. So they mitigate heat. Important for air quality. They can water problems. There are also some very and also attractive living environment. So also in that regard, attract and retain. Therefore, it is very important to so many reasons. Not the result of, let's say, then you start to hear. So therefore, it's very important to understand finding green spaces, nature, people, overlap. Okay, is it better? Yes, is this better? Okay, so it's about these three pillars. Yeah, still good? Yeah. I think you have to remind me later. Yeah. Yeah, from a nature point of view, it's what I mentioned. Green infrastructures are important for water, soil, and relief, but also you can make use of natural succession. So you can make use of natural processes in order to create green spaces. So it's not only to make only a design and execute it like that. No, it's also about allowing certain green typologies to develop over time. Logical point. And of course, and then the amount of flora and fauna will also. Also from a people's perspective, it's about orientation in space and time. So often we think about green infrastructures as a kind of basic infrastructure. But what we see around us, usually also in new developments, is that all green spaces look the same. So then the question is, how can you adapt more to the local circumstances and make the green structure also as an expression of the local context? And that's a very interesting and important design assignment. Because in the end, green spaces are also social infrastructures where people can meet and greet, get to know each other. And that's also, I think, a very important element of green space. So it's about creating inclusive spaces. But then, of course, landscape comes in. Landscapes is, in a way, a kind of binding factor. It's like where all these things come together in terms of spatial organization and patterns, but also in terms of historical structures. Because landscapes already exist for centuries. So then the question is, how can you incorporate that into the development of urban forms? But how do you translate that then on a local scale level? And therefore, it's very interesting to look at these dimensions from a contextual point of view. And now let's say the word context is hidden by 9 people entered the waiting room. But actually there's the word context. So this is like a contextual approach. So it's not only about designing these elements, but you have to do it in a contextual way. So that means that not any green space looks the same, but that they should adapt to the local circumstance. And that's actually where this landscape-based design approach comes in. It's about combining these components into a contextual approach. Ecological context, but also the social cultural context. So a public space here in Bandung should look very different than a green space in Jakarta or in any place in the world. So it is not a kind of standardized procedure, it's like a contextual design approach. And therefore you guys are so important because you have the skill to translate design principles into a local context, together with the community, together with the government, together with industry, etc., etc. So landscape-based design approach means actually that it is a space that you combine design and research, that you work in an interdisciplinary way, so urban planners work together with landscape architects, work together with civil engineers, but also with social sciences. It addresses different scale levels from the region to the backyard. So it's really like moving through the scales, not only making a nice regional plan or only making a nice park structure, but to think about the systemic relationships. And it is about being social and ecological. So then the question is how to do that. So therefore, the landscape can be considered as the basis. So here you see, for instance, a map with different landscape typologies in the Netherlands. And I'm sure you also have similar maps for Indonesia, where you show, let's say, the result of this endless interaction with humans and their environment, which create different characteristic spatial units, you can say. And all of these units have their own characteristics in terms of ecology, water management, how people relate to their environment. And when you take this kind of knowledge as the basis, then you really understand the contextual nature of the design assignment. When you look a little bit more closer, you can start developing a kind of analytical techniques. And I'm not going to elaborate on that now because I don't have time. But here you see a couple of methods which help you to understand the contextual relationships throughout the scales. For instance, when you look at the position in the landscape, so here you see, for instance, a soil map of a part of the Netherlands, and the red dots are, let's say, special estates, so historical places where people used to live for hundreds of years. And when you look closely, you see a kind of correlation between the location of the red dots and the colors of the soil. And what you will see is that most of the locations are based on the transition from high to low, from dry to wet, from rich to poor in terms of nutrients. And when you understand this logic, you can also start to develop new strategies, because when you look at these scale levels, you also start to understand on what kind of conditions you can design with on a more district level. And here you see a couple of examples of like, this was like made by the first landscape architecture professor in the Netherlands. He got the assignment to build a new urban extension. And the first thing what he wondered himself, okay, what are the soil typologies there? And he asked the first soil scientist in the Netherlands to create a soil map in order to understand, yeah, I'd say the geographic nature of the area and the possibilities and the impossibilities. And then based on, let's say, the different soil typologies, he started to craft an urban plan. So it's not to have a kind of urban design and then impose it to the landscape. No, really start to understand the natural systems where you are working with and then base your design on that understanding. And then, of course, in the end, it trickles down into the public spaces. So how can you translate all of these ideas into a design? And later, this will be one of the examples I will elaborate more on. But here you see that, let's say, these three levels of position, condition, and operation are very important scale levels you need to take into account. So when you have to make a design for a park or a public space or a backyard, ask yourself, what kind of position does it have in the whole landscape system? And how does it translate into design assignments in terms of conditions? Because in the mountainous areas, you have other possibilities than in the delta or in the middle stretch. So all of these relationships should be taken into account in the Okay, then I come to, let's say, another important element of this approach is, of course, you need to have a strong knowledge base. Because here you see that it is also a matter of combining different knowledge with each other. So you need to have knowledge on the hydrological system, ecological system, on the performance of certain green typologies in terms of water stress and heat stress mitigation. And here are a couple of, I'd say, Dutch, but also international examples on knowledge which you can use as a basis for urban design. And when you look closer, you see actually all across the world, three types of solutions to how to combine knowledge with design. Because often we try to, make a distinction between knowledge and design. But actually this type of design assignments require a strong combination of that. And we did some research on that. And then we came to the conclusion that there are actually three types of approaches. So you have a top-down prediction modeling approach, so where people try to build complicated computer models on water streams, on temperature, on ecological systems, etc., and take that as the basis for future planning and design. On the other end of the spectrum, we see more bottom-up oriented resiliency approaches, like community building approaches. So really start to work with the community and start to get to know the context from a local perspective. It's also a big group of types of research, how to collect knowledge into and make it operational for the design. And of course, you have these mixed methods where you try to combine these two worlds. And of course, in the end of the day, it's very important to combine these two approaches. So it's not either only using a modeling approach or a community approach, but what if we could combine these approaches? So it's also try to make the connection between different disciplinary fields and how to work with that. So remember, when you get confronted with modeling exercises, that it is not the only way to incorporate knowledge into your design process. Because often we see that around the globe. So when you don't have a model for this or that, it is not regarded to be scientific. But we know from examples across the world with very strong evidence that this is for sure not the only way how we can generate knowledge and incorporate it into our design. So there are many ways on how to integrate knowledge into your design process. And that's actually, a very important notion. And then, of course, it's also very important to look into examples across the globe on how you can how you can integrate this knowledge and what type of knowledge is available just by looking at the examples. historical examples, contemporary examples, on, for instance, metropolitan parks and networks. So how can you create a network of green environments for a city in order to create a robust landscape infrastructure, green infrastructure, which acts as a formative power for urban development? You can just have a look at some good examples across the globe. So you don't have to start from scratch, but you have to learn from it, not to copy paste it, but really to look with your X-ray glasses and to say, okay, what can we learn from it? Because for instance, when you look into this historical plan in the end of the 19th century, which is, I think, a world famous plan, Elliot, the landscape architect, of course, for sure, he knew the landscape system very well, but he spent most of the days talking with local communities in order to learn from it, but also to make them aware of certain qualities and how they could work with it in order to shape their future city. And for the ones who had the privilege to go there, you will see that it is a fantastic urban environment still because of this strong backbone. Yeah, then you can say, okay, when I look to all of these examples, there are different ways on how to go about it. You can create networks, you can create frameworks, you can create green corridors, just based on a proper understanding of looking at all of these examples. This is also a very interesting synthesis of knowledge available on science. So actually this principle states that every home should have like 3 trees visible from their house, that the neighborhood should have like 30% canopy cover, and that there should be a kind of substantial green space within walking distance, like 300 meters walking distance. And of course, we can argue about the numbers, but you will see in the literature that there is a kind of consensus about these numbers. But then the question is, when you have such a rule, how do you translate it into the design of a new neighborhood or a new city like Nusantara? Can we really provide for trees for every home? Create 30% canopy cover, creating substantial green spaces at 300 meters walking distance. So also here you see that you have a very strong knowledge base, which you can make use of for future design. And also, yeah, this kind of overviews on design principles, on how to do things, how to create a more diverse, biodiverse open space structure, or how you can integrate water into the public space in different ways. How you can design for climate mitigation, for cooling down the public spaces, to make the city more lively, livable, and also more sustainable. So in other words, there's a wealth of knowledge available when you look closely to examples. So actually there are 3 types of knowledge resources in the field of planning and design. And the most important one is the constructed projects where we can learn from. So when you have a question in that regard, please look outside and look with the eyes of an architect, with the eyes of a landscape architect, and try to learn from it and to see what works and not works. And then, of course, you can make this wonderful overviews. And these are only a couple of examples from a design office in the Netherlands to collaborate with to create a green infrastructure plan for the city of Antwerp. You know, this is a very big city as well. But here we try to work from the regional scale up to the local scale. Then, of course, you can also look into patterns, urban patterns. So together with a couple of my PhD students, we are elaborating on a kind of toolbox which help you to consider different green patterns. So combinations of different principles and how you can make use of that as a design tool. And when you scan the QR code, you can just download it for free and have a look. Then we also have like technology and data supported design. So we can also make use of the technology in order to get new insights in how a certain area functions in terms of accessibility, for instance, but also what people appreciate or not. So a couple of my PhD students are working, for instance, on the quality of water and green using artificial intelligence, in order really to see what kind of environments people appreciate to live in, and which they Also make use in terms of accessibility of water and green. But also the risk of water and heat can be modeled. So here you see an example of how that can work. So this is like the situation as it is now, before and after. So this is like a modeling of heat, so and how more red it is, how hotter it is. But when you plant trees, then you see the effect of it. Get the point. And this is like a kind of very intuitive way to incorporate this kind of tools in the design process. But also when you start modeling, make sure that it is easy to handle in the design process. That you don't need to have a PhD degree to understand what you are doing, but to do it in a kind of low profile way so that everybody can understand where this is about. So in this case, we developed this tool for the municipality also to engage with the civil servants, the local community, to see the importance and the effects of for instance, trees in the urban environment, and also incorporating water systems, etc. But I think you get the point. So we have different type of knowledge and ways on how to integrate knowledge into the design process. So design is not only a kind of artistic, creative endeavor, which is this in itself, but it can also have like a strong knowledge base. So it's about how can we combine these two. That's, I think, a very big challenge for the time period where we live in, because we used to put things in disciplinary and sectoral silos. That's the beautiful thing of designers as we are, that we can combine all of these things into the design. And how can we do that? So we also experimented in the past 15 years with some procedures, which are very helpful in order to engage with any community, with any government, in order to create this kind of landscape-based solution. And what you see is that you go through 4 different steps of diagnosis, strategy making, design explorations, but also developing an action perspective. And as you can see, it circles around the idea of transdisciplinary working. So it's not that you make an analysis and then come up with a design and try to persuade the community in order to build it like that. No, you have to incorporate them right from the start in this process of understanding the area. Because you can also learn a lot from the interaction with the local community, interaction with the government, interaction with the industries, and interaction with other experts. You learn from that. And based on this learning process, you can start to develop long-term strategies. How can we make a change? How can we address certain issues on the longer term? And then to reason backwards, okay, what can we start doing tomorrow? And doing this step by step is a very fruitful approach in order to really make a change, to transform an environment in a more sustainable way. And last but not least, you also have to think about what kind of actions are connected to it. What kind of business models do we need to develop in order to make it work? So we can, for instance, redevelop or regenerate a mangrove forest, but when you don't provide people livelihoods and connected to that regeneration, it will never work. So you also have to think together of new ways to get a kind of economic gain. And therefore, it's very important to do some small-scale pilot projects to learn from it and to see what works and not works. And therefore, you need to have these conversations. And I'm sure you know this kind of participation strategies. And also in the Western world, we try to do that in a more effective way. So not only to say, okay, we have a kind of participation project in our design, but to make it the design process. And that costs time, because you need to build trust from all the partners involved. And usually you don't have this time. So that's always a big challenge on how to do that properly. But when you are aware of it, you can find ways to integrate that. And of course, also there we can make use of new technologies, like drawing the big iPads to make drawings in order really to understand certain relationships. And in some cultures, this turns out to be a very effective means to, get into a co-creative participatory process. But it can also be like drawings like this. So maybe in your eyes it's a little bit ugly drawing, but it is the result of a very long process of engagement with different stakeholders. So actually, this is the most valuable drawing of the whole process. Because this is the end of the accumulation of knowledge and ideas you develop together. Of course, later we translated this into beautiful maps. So then it's very important to understand that in an urban context, we have different spatial typologies you can. And one of the most obvious ones is like taking into account natural reserves into an urban. So here you see some examples, or an example nearby Shenzhen, where an extensive mangrove wetland forest was taken into account into an urban planning. And that is not only okay to say to put a fence around it and to say, okay, this is like the border of the city and this is the nature reserve. No, of course not. It's also about creating this kind of transitional zones where these two worlds come together. Also a certain zoning in order to protect nature, but also provide people the possibility to experience nature. So when you look around you, you have an abundance of natural resources. So then the question is, how can you make that part of an urban environment in an effect? Not only for us as citizens, as people, but also from a flora and fauna perspective. So what are the, let's say, the minimum sizes they need to thrive? And can we play around with that in a designerly way? Just making you aware of it, that this is like a design tool. Or what do you think of cultural heritage landscapes, how they can become part of an urban environment? Also another example from Hangzhou in China, where this kind of historical feature also is becoming part of a huge urban development, but still has this atmosphere of how it was in the past. So not only from a heritage protection point of view, a very interesting approach, but also increasing the livability and the sustainability of the city as a whole. Yeah, we also talked about the functioning of public green spaces. So this is like the most obvious way. Yeah? So and we discussed already a couple of ways on how to do that. But this is like how we can create public spaces as social infrastructures. So parks are so important for people to meet, but also to have a kind of climatological and biodiversity-rich environment. Derelict land, abandoned land like railway areas, cemeteries, post-industrial sites, also a very important element in green space design. So when you think about green infrastructure design, please take into account these different typologies and ask yourself, okay, what are the qualities and characteristics of these areas and how can I contextualize that in my design? And to end up this lecture, I would like to show you two examples, because this is like all theory. Yeah? It's important to have that. But now we also want to put it into practice, right? And this is a small village in the east of the Netherlands where we have this going through road. So, and of course, this was like the center of the village. So you can imagine what kind of problems here coming from that. So then the municipality had a strong argument to transform this road into a public space where green climate adaptation and also the social inclusion was. So and then the designers started to understand the landscape system behind. And I'm not going to give a lecture geography in the Netherlands, but we still have some higher grounds. And then you see that there's also this relationship between the higher locations and the lower locations with, let's say, areas where the water can infiltrate. So actually, by projecting the road onto the system, you really start to understand on how you can contextualize solutions in terms of green design, but also how to incorporate systemic water issues. And then, of course, we start also to look into the design principles by looking at other cases where we already experimented with, for instance, water infiltration possibilities in relation to public space design. And then based on that notion, we started to design profiles in order to transform the area from this going through road into a publicly inclusive and also ecological inclusive space. Also in terms of the species chosen here, they're very much connected to the region. Because also when you look to the map, you see that this is also a green corridor connecting different green patches outside the city. So it's also drawing the nature into the urban environment. And this is how it looks like now. And yeah, it won many prizes, not only because of the design, but also because people appreciate it. It was also, let's say, this public participatory process where local entrepreneurs were involved in the development of this park. And here you see how it actually works. Because when there's a heavy rainstorm, water is infiltrated, is collected into this area, and has also the possibility to infiltrate into the soil, which does not only help to mitigate the flooding within the village, but also helps to recharge the groundwater, to create a more healthy water system for the longer term. Another example is on a bigger regional scale. It's in the western part of Germany. And here you will find a big industrial area where a lot of mining industry is abandoned over years. But at the same time, also a lot of social problems, ecological problems related to pollution were there. But also matters of heritage. How can we protect the industrial heritage of this area and develop it in such a way that it becomes also instrumental in the ecological development and the water sustainable development of this area? So therefore, the designers here started to think, okay, how can we do that? And then they started to work from the open space structure. So they did not take in the buildings as the starting point, but the open space structure as the starting point. And they started this kind of to develop this kind of green network, which is also connected to water systems. It is also connected to different recreational routes. So it's also about connecting different communities. And based on this big green space strategy, there were, let's say, tens and hundreds of smaller projects identified, which has started to develop with local businesses and with the government. So each red dot, you can say, is an own project with its own dynamic, but it contributes to the bigger picture on how to regenerate the region as a whole. So here you see this relationship again between working through the scale. So not only fantastic local projects, but also the regional aspect. And this is, I think, one of the, I'm sure it is in one of your architecture books. It's Duisburg North, which is a famous example of a local project within that bigger framework, where this industrial site was transformed into a park, where people can recreate, where ecology can thrive, where sustainable water management was part of. So also here, it was not only like green color on the map, it serves many, many functions. And also for here, I think it offers a lot of potentials in cities like Bandung, Jakarta, in order to look into this type of structures and to see how you can make it useful as a green infrastructure. And here you see some pictures of it. The planting site. Whenever you have the possibility to come to Europe, it's really worthwhile to visit it in order to see this kind of ideas into practice. Here you see how abandoned industrial relics can get a new life for climbing, for instance. Or here you see kind of purification plants. Here you see also some nice gardens which mimic and evoke certain spatial experience. So it's really a place where many of these ambitions we have come together, but also some very strong architectural and aesthetic features. So green infrastructure design is not only about making it work, but also making it a nice and attractive environment. where all of these things come together. So it's not only to make an aesthetically nice environment, but also to make it ecological, work as an ecological phenomenon or as a water machine. And in this kind, looking at this kind of examples, you see on how you can do that. So this is like two small examples. On the one hand, starting from a small scale, working up and down. And this is like an example working from a bigger scale up to the local scale. The whole point of landscape-based green infrastructure design is about work in interdisciplinary ways, but try to combine different disciplines, take spatial design as the basis in order to integrate also knowledge, so knowledge-based design. It's also about working throughout the scales, and it's also about involving the local communities as well as the government in the further development of that. And if you want to read a little bit more, you can just download this book or buy it in the bookstore, but you can download it for free. So I would say, please have a look and let me know if you have questions. So thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Thank you for the insightful presentation. You mentioned about the landscape-based design, combining with the knowledge-based design as well. And I think this is very interesting for a lot of us here, since I think most of the students are coming from the course of infrastructure planning, right? So this is a good start to have this course to start the new semester. So let's start the Q&A session, everyone. Are there any questions first from the audience here? Agus, yes. Then, okay, we have three people. Nice. Okay, let's start from Pak Agus first.
Yes, thank you, Stefan, for your presentation. And I'm interested, not the substance, but your logic. Yeah. The two keyword that I capture from you, the first is the process, and the second is the knowledge. But if you go to Indonesia, and you know Indonesia has many different concern of the Dutch people and Indonesian people. I have informed from my college that the European society is concerned about the future of the planet, the future of the earth. So they're strong to advocate about the sustainability, because the European, like you, concerned about the future and insecure of the sustainability of the earth to support our life. But if you know Indonesia, the 50% of Indonesia that appointed our president is not concerned about the future, it's the concern of the tomorrow. Tomorrow we eat not with what it will we eat. So the president is focused on the makan bergizi gratis, yes, to support the local citizen. You know the local citizen, yeah. The Indonesian citizen is need the food. Okay. Now, this is maybe it's about opportunity of the discussion about the concern of the future from the Europe society and the concern of the tomorrow and the food. Yes, I think this concern of the food, Indonesian people. I think it's a long discussion we can generate and generate our research proposal, research collaboration about sustainability in the environment and the food. It's very big opportunity to collaborate the research, and maybe in this time I can open your opinion about the correlation about the food, the Indonesian concern for tomorrow, and ecological and sustainability that European concern from the future of the world. Okay, thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I think it's a very challenging question. But actually, I have to disappoint you because you say in Europe, have this strong sustainable driven approach. But actually it is not. So we also suffer from short-term disease. So actually we have these big ambitions, but when it comes down to, let's say, practical application, then let's say the short-term gains come into play. But therefore, it's very important to, how to say, try to use different words or different arguments to achieve the same objectives. And that's actually what we try to do in our project, is to have indeed a long-term perspective, or in order to, how to say, establish a more future, but at the same time, to think of on how it gets beneficial for people tomorrow. So that means that you have this idea, okay, what will be the financial gain if you do it like that? Because that, like you know, money talks. That's also what you see all across the world. Extractivism is driven by that. People don't care because they say, yeah, I'm already dead. So that's like how people used to think. But therefore, we try also to train our students, but also to implement in our projects ways on how to make it better now. So for instance, I was involved by the regional plan of the Pearl River Delta in South China, which is one of the biggest, fastest urbanizing deltas in the world, in China. And there we had exactly the same problem. Because then as I had the story about the future of the delta, and everybody say, wow, this is really fantastic. And the next day they just continued in the ways they always did. Nice story from a professor from the Netherlands. It's beautiful, but now. And then we started to realize maybe we should build in some other arguments why to do it in such a way. Then we started to calculate a little bit what the financial gain will be on the longer term. So we had the same story, but then we connected the long-term financial gain to it. But then the same. And then they say, yeah, fantastic. But yeah, we need to build this CBD in the next couple of years. What can we do about it? Then we thought maybe we should connect these concepts to the short term. And then we came to the conclusion, when you coordinate, you can earn money by being more efficient. We also started to find out ways on how to make use of the landscape logic in order to build some higher densities in certain locations, and therefore freeing space up for other places. And then we run into the problem of the procedures, because then people start, yeah, this is what we want to do, because we have like financial gain on the short term moment already. But now we have this kind of policy boundaries which do not allow us to do that. So, but actually, when we told this story to, let's say, the local government, they also started to implement a new, how to say, policy measure enabling of this kind of. Though this was a kind of small-scale pilot project, turned out to be very successful. And now it's implemented also in other parts of the Pearl River Delta. So in other words, you can say short-term thinking prevails anywhere in the world, but you need to come up with ways on how to effectively implement the ideas on a smaller scale, not only from a spatial and ecological and social point of view, but also from a policy and financial point of view. Because when you do not, how to say, incorporate these elements into the argument, it will never work. Then it will be, let's say, the result of all of this. Then we build everything. Then we have some patches of green, and then we bring in the designers making it. We need to turn it around, because we know that when you take the natural system as the basis, it will, of course, from sustainability point of view, way better. But it also will bring you the money you like to have. And actually, I don't care about money, but I know that it is a very strong argument in this process. Sometimes as a landscape architect or urban planner, you need to put on another hat and ask yourself, okay, how can I make it a convincing argument? Of course, you need to tell the story about sustainability and about importance of heritage and culture and ecology. You need to inspire and make people enthusiastic about it. But then in the other end, you need to think together with entrepreneurs on how you can make it work. Usually when you sit down together, then you will come with very smart solutions that work, which are very different from the pathways people.
Thank you, Pak Agus. I think this question is very relevant in Indonesian context as well because the government here held only the position for around 5 years, right? And then they need to provide certain legacy afterwards. So they need to provide what is the benefit for them in the short term, in the context of short term. Okay, so I think there are two questions. Yeah, please introduce yourself first.
Hello, Professor. My name is Samudra. I'm a second year student in urban planning. I have a question on how does this concept applies within the context of the trends of building vertically because of limited land use, especially in big cities and urban sprawl like Jakarta and Bekasi. Yeah, because it seems like the big city is really packed in Indonesia and has a limited land use.
It's a really good question. Therefore, I think, so when you have a landscape-based approach, of course, it's not only about ecological, also about developing new housing typologies, which enables concentrated way of housing. So like, but make sure that in this high density development, also, let's say, the requirements of nice public space and green space. Because what we see from urban planning and architecture point of view, have fantastic typologies in terms of that we hardly take into account the direct context. I think there are many potentials and opportunities to do so as long as we connect these two worlds. One of the slides, I showed you this pattern language for green, fed by this high density urban development. But when you will read the article, I think you will find some interesting clues on how, let's say, high density urban development can become a driver to make a social ecological. What we see now is high density environment. There's hardly any space. Take that into account. Abilities and potentials to develop. That's also what I mentioned before. So we tend to put things in boxes. So liking making a nice high density, something for the urban designer or for the architect. Then the leftover spaces are designed by the landscape. When you come up with a kind of integral design process where you try to combine these fantastic examples appearing below. When I look to in our own practice in Amsterdam, for instance, we also have this kind of policy of concentration, so high density development stimulated. But over the last decade, also try to implement this more integral approach to it. Now we can only do tenders where also the public space, water aspects are taken into account. So it's not to do one thing or another, no, it's to do both things. So this landscape-based approach is actually a very inclusive approach, you can say, because it is drawing all these fields together. And that's actually very innovative because also in the fields of science, but also in the policy sectors, you see that things are divided in sectors. You are responsible for the building, we are responsible for the infrastructure, you are responsible for the park. There we run into problems. When you make it a more integral design assignment, yeah, you can work with that and make a change. And here in this academic environment, you have the freedom to think about that. And that's, yeah, you have gold in your hands. You have the place to experiment with these new concepts. Here you have the time and possibility to work on that together with your colleagues, future colleagues. And then later out in the field, you can make a difference. Because also now in Nusantara, fantastic ambitions, but most of the people are trained in like sectorial ways. And you see also how the organization is designed like that. So that makes it very hard to put it into practice. And it's not only in the case of Nusantara, you see it everywhere in the world. You say, okay, it's an Indonesian problem. I would say it's a global problem. Because I travel quite a bit over the world, and I see everywhere the same problems. Even in the Netherlands, we have big problems. But it starts with you. So try to think about how you can combine all of these elements in new ways. And therefore, you need to have this strong knowledge base. You need to bring in the design creativity, and you need to think about ways on how to make it happen. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hello. Uh, Sir, people, my friend and people usually call me Nara. My question is maybe a big question that what is the common mistake when we design an urban that we could avoid? Because for me, designing an urban is something big that maybe we usually from architect when study we usually design a small or medium object. We never design on big scale urban. And what is the most issue that found in the process?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and it draws back to what I said before. It's about being aware that this local context provides you important clues in order to develop. So even on the architectural scale, climate, force of the wind, the rain patterns, the possibility of the soil will inform your decision as an architect. So even though you design an object, you can take into account the context. Therefore, it's very interesting to look into traditional and indigenous architecture practices because these people learned over centuries on how to do that. It's like an accumulation of knowledge in there, which is a very important basis. And it doesn't mean that we have to recreate historical villages everywhere. Of course not. But we can learn from the principles and take that into account into our design. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is that we throw away the knowledge we have already and think that we can do it better. But actually what we do is we enter this new process of trial and error. Especially from the 1850s onwards, like in the industrial era and the emergence of science, we thought we can do it better. But now actually you come to the conclusion that we cause a lot of problems. So therefore, it's better to look closely to, say, natural systems, to traditional practices, than to think, okay, what are the principles behind and how can I make use of that? Architecture scale, public space design scale, and on an urban scale. That's, I think, number one. The other thing, what's, I think, very common is this short-term thinking we talked about before. So short-term thinking is good as long as you put it into a long-term perspective, and the other way around, because we see also zoning plans, which are kind of projections, but they are actually regarded as blueprint plans, also very destructive for the environment and for local communities. So then you ask yourself, okay, what does it mean for the short combination? Is, I think, and yeah, this interdisciplinarity. So it's not only about architects. Maybe you should reach out to your colleagues from urban design, landscape architecture, social sciences in order to say, how can I do it better? What can I learn from you? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I would like to give the opportunity to the audience online. Are there any questions from the audience online? You can just open your mic if you want to. Yeah, there is one from the chat. I heard that the students from Tier 1 would like to ask questions. You can open your mic first, your microphone first, then we can go into the questions from the chat. No? Okay, I think still there is a technical problems. Then, yeah.
Hello, hello, yes.
Yes, please
Okay.
go ahead.
Sorry, once again. Okay, excuse me, Professor. Beforehand, let me introduce myself.
You
My name
speak
is
up a little
Farrell.
bit. Very difficult to hear your voice.
Excuse me. Hello, hello.
Coba
And
kasih.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Hello, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Volume.
Uh, Beforehand, Professor, let
It's
me
better you
introduce
sit
myself.
there, but louder.
Iya speakernya. Coba lagi suaranya lagi.
Okay, test, test. Is my sound clear?
Yeah, we can hear you, but we couldn't see you now.
Okay, wait. Okay. Okay, beforehand, thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Beforehand, let me introduce myself, Professor. My name is Farrell. I'm from Indonesia-Netherlands, SAPPK. Okay, for my question, okay, maybe currently in our state of urban planning, prioritize day in Indonesia, maybe there are many challenges in the current state of planning and implementation of practices around urban planning and from the literature and what I felt of green places undergoing maybe densifications such as Bandung. There are many challenges such as the provision of green space in areas undergoing densification, counteracting social inequalities, and also the consideration of resident perspectives. And then, as you stated before, we need to be aware, and this has become somewhat of a global problem. And what I want to ask is first, how do we, for surely, increase awareness? How do we deal with those problems, especially in dense areas such as Bandung? Maybe especially as a student, how can we, as future planners, overcome these challenges while increasing awareness? And also, secondly, uh, what should we prioritize first? Should we prioritize preserving green spaces or enhancing quality of existing green spaces? Or is it actually optimal if we do those things simultaneously? Okay, thank you.
Did you get the question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
more or less, yeah. Yeah, I think of course, these are very challenging questions, and I'm not sure if I can answer them in full. But regarding the awareness thing, I think you have the possibility to show alternatives. So when you inspire decision makers and local communities in how the environment can look like beyond their imagination, and then also show, let's say, the benefits of doing that in different ways. So I think you have the possibility to show, let's say, inventions which are not, let's say, there yet. But you can show the possibility of doing things in a different way. So that's, I think, number one. And that therefore these participatory processes are so important, because there you can build the idea together and show alternative ways on how they treat their public spaces, how they treat their green spaces. Another very important element is, of course, the strong knowledge base we have. The benefits of having a healthy, green, ecological, inclusive space has many benefits for the health of the people, for climate, for biodiversity, for economic reasons. So there are many evidences available which become a very strong argument in the design process. And of course, depending on the audience you work for, of course, when you sit on the table with the government, you use other words than you use with the local people. But you can use the same argumentation as a way to implement it. And I think what is really important, regardless the stakeholder, is that you show on how you can translate these big ambitions into practical solutions. Because there's also like a couple of days ago, we were in a fisherman village, and we also discuss together with my students, by the way, and we try also to discuss with the fishermen how they foresee their future. And they were very clear about it, that they had some serious issues, for instance, with erosion by the sea. Then they thought that the only solution is to build this concrete dike like we are so good at in the Netherlands. Then they thought maybe I can give them some solution on how to build a dike there. Then I said, yes, of course we can do that, but while doing that, you will cause more problems than you will. So then we started to explain that they could make use of low-cost solutions in order to accumulate the sediment, make a natural barrier, which over time can grow with the sea level and which also can stimulate mangrove development, wetland development. Then we show them in the field on how they can make very simple but effective structures in order to protect their village. So then you can have this fantastic story, but when you are not able to translate it into this kind of practical solutions, it will never work. But therefore, it's also very good for anyone to look into your environment and to see how things work and not. Also to engage into some practical experiments. Because also what we discuss with them, yeah, it's nice to have this idea, but maybe we should test it out. See how it works over months, over years. And as a scientist, it's of course very interesting to monitor and to collect data and whatever. And for the local people, it's really nice to see that it works. You empower them, you provide them the means to do it themselves. And that's also one of the questions I saw in the chat, is that most of these landscape-based solutions can be very cost effective, because you can use the power of nature to do it. And of course, in some parts, you can make a fancy park or whatever when it is needed. But that's usually not the point. The point is that we hardly make use of natural processes like sedimentation and erosion in a water environment or ecological succession. So when you, maintain certain green spaces in a certain way, ecology will develop by itself. So it's almost for free. But yeah, you need to have some time. That requires that you need to engage in a kind of conversation with the people to explain them how it works, so that they don't have the solution tomorrow, that it may be some while. But at the same time, you can say, maybe we can also make use of this landscape in order to grow food and agriculture, or grow fruit trees or whatever. So there are so many fantastic examples. Hope this answered your question.
I think we have one more questions to be answered, Professor, from the chat. I think you have answered half of it. There are two questions. I think this is our last questions about the importance of integrating green infrastructure for sustainability and challenges about the budget. Yeah, this is a typical classic problems, I think, all over the world. And then the second question is about, can you scroll down, Pak? Yeah. Okay, related to transportation infrastructure, how should transportation system can be positioned in relation to green open spaces?
Okay, also a very good question. I think to start with a lot and train and other kinds of energy infrastructures, the benefit they have is that they are continuous structures. So they connect things functionally. But then the question is, can they also connect spatially? That's usually the biggest challenge, because we make a road to get from A to B in the most efficient way. Then we use all kinds of civil engineering principles in order to do it. But what if you consider the road system also as a potential public space structure? So that means that you do not only design the road to go from A to B, but maybe also as a connecting infrastructure to connect both sides of the areas you slice through and make a barrier from. So it's also like a different conception, you can say. And also, I think across the globe, we see some fantastic examples of infrastructure design, which also is developed in a landscape infrastructure way. So not only meeting the demands of getting people or energy or whatever from A to B, but also to become a connector at the local scale level. So not only in the lateral way, but also in the longitudinal way. So it becomes from a line to a zone. And when you think about that in your design of any infrastructure, it will provide you a different view to the infrastructure you are going to design with. And sometimes it's just about a highway exit, or sometimes it's about a resting place along the highway, or sometimes it's about how to integrate the highway into the urban tissue. So there are many interesting conceptual possibilities there. There also, when you look closely to some of the examples we find in the world, also in Asian, yeah, you can see that by making these big infrastructures, you can also, because that's also what we often have, is this negative connotation. So we build an infrastructure because we have to for economic reasons, but why not see it also as an opportunity to make the environment better? That is like a different mindset, you can say, but it will also allow you to come up with innovative solutions. And usually when you talk to engineers in any form, you will see that there are a lot of possibilities, but they are just simply used to certain ways of working and implementing things. And they're not used to other ways of thinking. So when you engage in a conversation or you have your open mind yourself, you see that you can also have like similar solutions which are way better. Question? Oh, okay. So, because also when I often collaborate with my colleagues from civil engineering with regards to water management and flood safety or traffic engineering. And then we come to that conclusion that actually people are, let's say, path dependent in their ways of thinking. But when you allow them a different perspective, then you see that there are also other possibilities. Actually, for you, you are the future. So when you have an open mind, try to think in a different way. And do not take things for granted all the time. Say, okay, we built these highways for decades like this. Maybe this is the way to go. Maybe you ask yourself, what if we do it like this or that? Create other elements to it. Then you will see that there's a world of possibilities opening, which is not only creative and sustainable, but also usually cost effective. Because that's also like one of the arguments I have. Usually people say, when we integrate green or have a green agenda, it costs money. But actually what we know, it's on the contrary. Like for instance, in the Netherlands, there we also have a lot of project developers, just building houses. It's their core business. But some of them, they have this open mind. So they also were young people and they started to think, maybe we can do it in a different way. So they created a kind of urban environments which took the landscape as the basis. So now we look into these projects and ask them, how did you finance this? And actually, usually it's the same. So we are used to certain ways of financing, which blocks out green and makes green more expensive. But when you have a different way of budgeting, you will see that you will earn a lot of money with it. So it's also like a mindset. So also there you can become a little bit more critical sometimes. Say, okay, maybe we should budget things in the different, because we also will gain. And yeah, also there are many reports showing that green solutions are highly cost effective and will increase values dramatically. So you have good reasons to do so, not only from a sustainability point of view, not only from a biodiversity point, water safety point of view, mental and physical health point of view, but also from a financial point of view. We have very strong reasons to rethink the models we are so used to.
Thank you, Professor. So yeah, in the long term, economic sustainability can be achieved as well. Yeah. Okay, I think that will be this will be the end of our session. Thank you everyone for your participation. I think you must have a lot of questions. And like Professor Steffen Nijhuis also mentioned before, there is the book that you can access online. And also, is it possible, Professor, if we distribute your presentation to the students? Yes, that's good. Yeah, that's very good. And we will also distribute the handout after this course. Let's give the professor a round of applause again, everyone. I hope this course is very beneficial for us. And after this, I will give the floor again to Iza to close the session. Yeah.
Thank you, Bu Andani, for bringing us a very interesting discussion and also productive session today. Before we end our event today, I would like to invite Ibu Dr. Puspita Dirghayani to give a closing speech. Please, Ibu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Iza. Thank you very much, Professor Steffen. And I'm really sorry that I didn't attend from the beginning. I suppose to open this lecture as on behalf of the interim dean. He cannot attend because he also attending executive meeting at the same time. I was having a lecture for 1 hour until 9, and unexpectedly I came late to this meeting. But I think the lecture that have been delivered by Professor Steffen is very, very relevant to our current challenges. Our region and our city is obliged to provide at least 20% of public green spaces and 10% of private green spaces. And there are lots of discussion how that it should be governed. And of course, there's an interesting part of your lectures about the business model, because it's not only about the land availability, but also how it is governed and managed. I think that was the challenges. And combining the concept with the other urban development concepts, I think it's also kind of intrigued us. Like, for example, in the context of transit-oriented development, or I was thinking about integrating it with a cycling lane in the city. Such a kind of concepts, I think, as you say, it will give more possibilities of how to deal with the issues. Thank you very much for the good and insightful lectures. I think it will be beneficial for us. And I think that is my closing remark. And I would like to hand over a token of appreciation for Professor Steffen. Okay, I will return the lecture to Iza.
Thank you very much, Ibu Puspita Dirghayani and also Prof. Steffen Nijhuis. And also I would like to invite the lecturers to the front and also Professor Steffen to take pictures. Professor, yes, please. Oh. Thank you very much. And also we would like to take pictures with the students. So please be prepared. Please for the students to stand up so we can take the picture clearly. Stand, please. Okay, everyone's ready? Move to the center, please. Closer to the center. To the center? Okay. All right, yeah. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, cheese. One more. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Oh, the last one. Okay. Last one more. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Also, I'd like to read some announcement for the participants. First, you need to fulfill the attendance list, both offline and online. You can find those information in the desk, okay? And you will also receive a follow-up email within 24 hours until 40 hours with link to view a recording today's lecture. On behalf of SAPPD ITB, we would like to say thank you for your active participation today and have a great rest of your day. See you in the next guest lecture event. I'm Iza signing off. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.